Bags of toys filling up our tables and the Salvation Army truck.
3, 2, 1. Open the door. Oh, watch out.
Our friends at the Charlotte Soccer Academy donating a truck filled with toys.
The biggest message is just we want to make sure that we can provide for those that aren't going to get anything for Christmas.
For more than 2 decades, WCNC Charlotte has teamed up with the Salvation Army to help make Christmas merrier for kids across the Charlotte area. And for families, coming out to Donation Day has become an annual tradition.
We've tried to support this every year, so we think it's a great thing for Christmas.
Especially for the Brookhart family.
We used to drop the toys off at the station.
This is Charlie Brookhart with our Larry Sprinkle after attending a donation day years ago. Now, at 13, he's helping keep the tradition alive.
It's just so fun to go out every year and get all the toys for people that don't have them.
And thanks to everyone who came out, we were able to collect nearly 3,400 toys on Saturday, a single-day record.
Now at 5:30, the number of children taking their own lives in North Carolina trended down last year, but these numbers are still much higher than before the pandemic.
Yeah, it's really bad out there. The Department of Health and Human Services actually says that that's largely due to the mental health issues that are ongoing and the number of guns that are out there. WCNC Charlotte's Christina Woodard shares the story of one teenager who is pushing to make a difference ahead of the holiday season.
For some, choosing to live is an act of courage.
It was a suicide attempt.
It's an experience 15-year-old Claire Olson knows all too well after trying to commit suicide back in June of last year.
I was struggling really bad with mental health issues. Anxiety is the biggest issue for me, and just constant worrying, constant stress, thinking about things in the past and future that I can't control.
Moments of her life, but it was also that same darkness that brought her to light.
I ended up spending a week in Presbyterian's behavioral health ward at the hospital. And while I was there, it was the hardest week of my life, but it was also what I needed in the moment. It was the best thing for me. After I was able to go home, I just started thinking about my situation and the experience I was in.
Claire says people like her family and therapist helped her better understand the importance of time and the value of life. Gifts she wants her peers to appreciate too.
I was in therapy every week, and my therapist Q, she gave me the best compliment I've ever received. She told me that I was a golden person, I had a gold heart.
Claire says that's when it hit her. She wanted to find a way to encourage her peers to cherish every breath they take. So she started the Gold Project, delivering warm blankets and pillows to mend broken hearts and minds.
I just started thinking about my situation and the experience I was in. And hospitals are very sterile, cold environments. And especially in behavioral health wards, all of your belongings are stripped from you and you're in paper scrubs, you're using very thin blankets. In the hospital, it's a very hard time. And I just want to bring as much comfort to these kids as I can.
She says her goal is to fill the empty void with love because suicide doesn't remove pain. Instead, it transfers it to someone else.
There's just so much to live for. I just want to make the holiday season as much comforting as I can.
Christina Woodard, WCNC Charlotte.
Yeah, wow, leaves many questions as well. If you'd like more information about how to contribute to a cause just like this, you can find more details on our website at WCNC.com. It's actually a specific cause. You can go right there. And for anyone who is struggling out there, maybe someone that is struggling, can reach out to the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988.
.44 this morning. We're asking where's the money as folks are shopping for St. Nick this December. Good morning and happy Tuesday. So Forbes is breaking down 3 tips to avoid scams this holiday season. Now this one is for the cyber shoppers specifically. Of the threats that are topping the list, writers at Forbes warn that you should be looking out for fake websites. They're on the rise this year. So the advice is to only use websites that start with these 5 letters, HTTPS. It's a sign of a secure site. Now, if you're like me and you like to crack open the laptop to fill your cart, well, this is the reminder to watch out for your phones as well. Our phone numbers are listed in places that we could not imagine. So scamsters are going to be contacting shoppers directly. That's through text, email, and calling your phone. And if you're shopping away from home, make sure you keep away from using public Wi-Fi, especially those that don't have a password at all. Now, those are the tips, but we have some additional numbers for some context. Starting here, 2.4 million. That's how many people reported fraud to the Federal Trade Commission just last year. And as for how much scammers are getting away with across the nation, it's more than $8 billion. That's in 2022. And then finally, the number 2. Online scams fall just second on the list for the most common types of fraud, according to federal data. Coming in at number 1 was investment scams.
At 6, Alzheimer's disease is a notoriously degenerative illness. Patients often get worse and worse as time goes on.
But some local Alzheimer's patients and their families say they're seeing some remarkable positive changes thanks to time spent at a facility right here in our own backyard. WCNC Charlotte's Michelle Bowden shows us how it's seeking solutions in the fight against time.
That right. These 4 guys are together 4 days a week, the best of friends.
4 of us guys all sat together at that table up there.
For Gene Boswell, it means his wife Pat is driving back and forth from Waxhaw to Charlotte twice a day.
45 minutes here, 45 minutes home, and then I come again in the afternoon.
But she says it's worth it.
Because of the great change that occurred after he started here.
Not that long ago, life was good. Normal.
We were very active in the church. He was an usher in the church for years, and so we were just happily going along in a normal life.
But one afternoon on a drive home from seeing their son in Atlanta, Gene suddenly wasn't comfortable driving.
Then I got to paying more attention and could see there were little changes. So we went to the doctor and he took the test and he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. His kind demeanor changed. He was not the Gene I knew. He was anxious. He just was not the same, and he got to be a little aggressive.
She says it wasn't until she found the Ivy that things got better, and the founder of the Ivy agrees.
He's night and day, really. Grouchy and just sort of grumpy, and I call it uncomfortable with himself. And now he is calm, talkative, and conversational, and just engaging.
Gene himself seems to notice the difference.
I've got a little bit of Alzheimer's, but coming here helps me a lot.
The Ivy was originally meant to give caretakers a break, a place their loved ones could spend the day. But as they focused more on science to help plan the activities, Ivy and her team noticed something. People with Alzheimer's who were previously isolated were changing thanks to the socialization there at the Ivy.
And just being with people similar to him, I think. So he began to open up more.
And the Brain Gym is focused on dual tasking. The science of dual tasking says that when you do physical and cognitive exercise simultaneously, they actually see change in the brain.
You get a lot of exercise here. It just helps with Alzheimer's.
So when we are doing these very focused activities or they're engaged in conversation and that social connection, they're actually building new pathways that can bypass and circumvent where the damage is.
Pat Boswell says she's got a piece of her husband back thanks to the Ivy.
Since coming here, he is not angry anymore. He helps at home again like he always did. It's wonderful. It puts me more at ease.
In Charlotte, Michelle Bowden, WCNC Charlotte.
One of the goals with our Seeking Solutions brand is to highlight the people and the programs that are making a difference, striving towards positive change and giving voices to those who might not always be heard.
Yeah, so on that note, we want to ask you at home, whose voice are we missing? If you have something our team should know about, you could reach out to us. You can email us at newstips@wcnc.com. You could see your story right here on our newscast.
Wake up to the news that matters most with meteorologist and traffic reporter Chris Mulcahy.
And we're all clear. We're keeping you smarter, safer, and on time.
Start your day the Mulcahy way. See the difference. 4:30 to 7 on WCNC Charlotte.
5:39 now, and we're asking, where's the money? Good morning and happy Thursday. So we've been looking for ways to save you money this holiday season. And this time, we're honing in on utilities. So we've got 3 money-saving tips that we found through Yahoo Finance. We know not to keep the water running, but writers in this article are actually taking it a step further. So you can save more money by not opening your tap all the way up. Maybe deal with that trickle or even like medium level of your faucet water. Now, more on water, this actually has to do with temperature. The National Resources Defense Council, or NRDC, has some numbers to go along with this tip. You can actually turn down the temperature on your water heater. The NRDC says many are cranked up to about 135 or 140 degrees, much too hot for humans. Researchers say taking that temp down even 20 degrees can actually save you about $400 a year. And finally, we've got a strategic way to use your ceiling fans. Now, we know it's winter, but here's how it can heat up your home. Writers suggest changing the direction of your fan to clockwise during the cold months. So hot air rises, and a fan rotating clockwise can actually push some of that warmer air back down into your room. And Home Depot has a price tag. They say you can reduce your utility bills 15% or even more with this tip. So in the spirit of helping each other out, saving money this season, we've got a question for you. What is your top money-saving utility tip? Text us at 704-329-3600.
Welcome back. The city of Charlotte is growing at a rapid pace. With that growth, though, local farmers, they are worried their farms could be put at risk.
Farming advocates say the city is on track to lose more than 19,000 acres of farmland by 2040, and now there's a push to conserve that land. WCNC Charlotte's Kaylin Hagwood is giving us a closer look at that effort tonight.
Well, farmers say preserving their land is one of their biggest concerns as the city continues to grow, but one group says they're doing what they can to ensure that farmland stays that way forever. Wisdom Jazar and his family have spent the last 5 to 6 years farming in Charlotte as part of their business, Deep Roots CPS Farm. As the city grows, he worries if local farms like his will have a place.
That's the million-dollar question right there is, how is the city working to make sure that there's a productive and a local food system?
While the city says it does have policies to encourage farming, it doesn't classify farms specifically as farmland, which can make it easier to turn farms into neighborhoods as the area grows.
And we haven't had that in 20 years, but that does not mean we cannot have a designation now.
At-large Councilwoman Dimple Ajmira says a farmland designation is something she's been advocating for, especially in areas where healthy food is harder to come by.
I will be talking to our planning director. In fact, I've already talked to her about it to see how we can continue or how we can actually improve our efforts to preserve our farmland.
The discussions come as one organization is hoping to take farmland preservation to the next level. The Carolina Farms Fund is working to ensure local farms will never become anything else through easement, a legally binding process.
We're looking at properties in Mecklenburg and throughout that 15-county region, but those areas that have heavy development pressure and where that pressure is butting up against agricultural production, that's really where we're looking to step in and try and conserve that acreage so that farmland stays in agriculture.
The group hopes to preserve at least 5,000 acres of land in the Charlotte region by purchasing existing farmland and ensuring it stays designated for farmers. He says they'll then sell that land to farmers who want to expand,
which makes us safer and more secure in our food system.
Multiple efforts towards supporting a system that works to support us.
The farmers provide for the restaurants, for the schools, for the businesses, etc.
Councilwoman Ajmira says the city will continue its community area planning into the new year.
Video this morning related to the arrest of Mr. Anthony Lee and Ms. Christina Pierre on November 13, 2023 in the Steel Creek Division. That release of video was authorized for public release by a judge after CMPD petitioned that release. While many of you are surely familiar with the facts of this incident, I want to lay them out one more time before Chief Jennings comes and gives you some of his remarks. So on November 13th, 2023, 2 Steel Creek Division officers were patrolling the area of South Tryon Street and West Arrowood Road when they observed 2 subjects sitting at a city-owned bus stop. Appeared to be smoking marijuana. The officers made contact with these 2 subjects, later identified as Anthony Lee and Christina Pierre. When the officers attempted to detain the 2 subjects, when they attempted to detain Mr. Lee, he was uncooperative. Additionally, Ms. Pierre immediately began to interfere. The 2 officers began to struggle with the 2 subjects. During the struggle, Ms. Pierre swung at one of the officers several times, assaulting him. In response, that officer returned a strike to Ms. Pierre, contacting her 1 time in the face. The initial officers called for backup officers to assist them. Ms. Pierre continued to resist efforts to place her in handcuffs. One of the backup officers delivered 17 strikes to Miss Pierre's right leg. She was then taken into custody. Officers located a loaded handgun in the bag that Mr. Lee had in his possession, and that was strapped to his chest throughout the incident. Mr. Lee and Miss Pierre were both arrested and charged. Their criminal charges have since been dismissed by the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office. The CMPD Crime Lab tested the substances that were seized from Mr. Lee and Miss Pierre. Those substances tested positive for marijuana. The lab report that from that test was made public this morning also. There's been an active CMPD internal affairs investigation that's been ongoing since this incident occurred to determine whether CMPD policy was followed. So I hope that catches everyone up to speed on the incident up until today. And now I invite Chief Jennings to come up and share some of his thoughts. Chief.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. First of all, I want to just reiterate, I'm not going to hash out the details of the case. They've already been spoken and said numerous times. Also want to thank, when we stood up here on November the 15th, just 2 days after the incident, I was pretty clear that we felt like this video, all the body-worn camera footage or any footage under CMPD should be released for transparency purposes and to tell the entire story of what happened. From the beginning, I said that the video release may or may not change opinions, but it will at least give a full perspective of everything that occurred on that day. Also, it's pretty certain or pretty clear, like we've said, that it is a use of force, and it's not pretty. It's hard to watch, and it's difficult not just from an outside perspective, but also internally, because we never want to see our officers, one, have to be subjected to being hit, but also not having to hit citizens. And so that is why I felt like it was important that we release this video, and we were subsequently did. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to watch the video as well. Secondly, I apologize for being late, but the reason I was being late is because we did have the internal hearing today. I want to make sure that I give much thanks to our internal independent chain of command review board that pushed this case to be able to look at it in depth and make a determination as to what the outcome of this investigation would be. So I wanted to also, in transparency, it's rare that I'm going to come out and speak on the results of an internal investigation at a press conference, but I think because of the magnitude of this case and this investigation, I thought it was important that we were able to release that today as well. And back to the body-worn camera footage as well, I want to thank the courts and the judge that authorized the release of it. We were able to get that through quickly, a lot quicker than anticipated. I think when we spoke in November, I mentioned it could be several months, and we were able to hear that within a few weeks. So I certainly appreciate that, and that goes a long way towards transparency from CMPD as well. So back to the internal investigation, there were a total of 7 officers that were investigated for this use of force. There were 7 officers. 6 of those officers, their cases were exonerated by the Independent Chain of Command Review Board. And 1 officer, Officer Pistone, who you already have the name, his allegation of use of force was sustained. Officer Pistone has received a suspension of 40 hours and also will be required to go through additional training that is deemed appropriate by the training academy. The incident here involves 17 strikes to Miss Pierre's leg. And you heard me mention before that those strikes were at the peroneal nerve, which are compliance strikes when someone is resisting arrest and has their hands behind their back or hands underneath them. Those are effective compliance strikes. If you look at the video closely, and this is where I really thank our Internal Affairs Division for being able to look at all the videos thoroughly and make that decision based on what they saw, and also be very objective and be able to determine every single strike that had occurred during this incident. Officer Pistone's first 3 strikes were effective. Those strikes allowed for officers to get Miss Pierre's hands behind her back. The officers then proceeded to try and handcuff her as Officer Pistone continued to deliver 14 additional strikes to her leg. Those 14 additional strikes were determined by the independent chain of command review board that they were not justified. I concurred with that, and I agree with that decision. It's very difficult when officers are put in these situations, but we also have we also are held to a higher regard when it comes to making decisions. And just as anything that we do, every single action that we take has to be justified. So had those 3 strikes been sufficient to get her hands behind her back, if the actions would have stopped at that point, then we would not be having this discussion about a sustained violation. So Officer Pistone has currently completed the internal investigation has been completed on Officer Pistone, and hopefully we will be able to move forward. And lastly, I want to discuss as well that there are some things that we have determined within our agency that we have to look at very closely when it comes to use of force. And we've discussed that before, and you've heard that we have a committee together that is help with community relations. With the help of community relations, we have been able to get some people from externally as well as to sit down with our people internally. And we're going to take a good hard look at not just our rules of engagement, but our use of force in situations. You know, we talked before, when is enough enough? When is it appropriate? Our compliance strikes, all of that stuff is going to be on the table and looked at. But what I will tell you is I'll never agree to a policy that tells our officers not to enforce the law, and I'll never agree to a policy that is based on someone's race or gender, and I will never agree to a policy that puts our officers in danger or their lives at risk. So we have a lot of work to do. We're going to continue on. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, and I'll be happy to answer them at this time. Or maybe no questions.
Chief, I spoke to 11 officers.
Yes.
Prior to this, and they said usually the internal affairs of this investigation will take some time, up to 3 months. This happened really, really fast. And was it thrown together, and was it expedited because you knew the videos were being released today?
No, absolutely not. We had several discussions as to how long this investigation would take and when it would take place. This had nothing to do with that. We had actually talked about even extending it when we didn't have to, just to get through and get everybody through all of this and the video release and everything else. With discussion within chain of command, we determined that we will proceed as appropriate. This investigation was done just like any other investigation. You're talking about a month, or maybe even a little over a month. So there was nothing that was particularly rushed. It was a long review for the officers. They were able to get it, for the board, they were able to get it about a week ago, and so they had about a week to review it, and I think they did a great job.
Chief, do you consider the punch to Ms. Pierre's face to be reasonable force?
Certainly, yeah. The punch, that's a great question. The punch to Ms. Pierre's face to be reasonable, that was deemed justified to be able to, because if you look at the video, I know there's a lot of question about that, but the officer did withstand 2 punches to his face prior to retaliating and striking Ms. Pierre. So that was a justified use of force at that point.
In the beginning, when they come to try to arrest him, and one of the officers puts his hand on Lee. Now, in the way that initial arrest went on, is there any issues or concerns with how that went on? Should they have said more as far as why they're being arrested and so forth? Because he kind of says, hey, you guys smoking weed, da da, and then there's a reach, right? And that hand, can you?
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, we can certainly always Monday morning quarterback and see what we could have done differently. I think I said in the first press conference, I wish there was a little more time in between us talking to them and making that arrest. However, the officers are justified to make the arrest as soon as they have probable cause that they're smoking marijuana. So for me to second guess when that arrest actually takes place is that's going to be a personal opinion that I would have to look at on how I would handle things. but they were certainly justified in that. Now, I will tell you that the officer, it is my opinion that just because the officer is placing him in the handcuffs or having him stand up, that does not necessarily mean he's going to jail. That could be as far as just to secure him while he issues a citation or search for further drugs or weapons, and that could have been as simple as that. But the officer is certainly justified to go up and initiate that arrest immediately if he wants to. But you know, ideally, yeah, we would love to see more talk and more conversation, but that's not something that would be a violation of our policy.
And then there was no internal investigation with the officer who punched her in the face or return strike.
Certainly, he was one of the 7 officers that was investigated for through internal affairs this hearing. So, and he was one that was justified. There were 7 officers total. 6 were exonerated, which means they were justified in their use of force. That includes the officers that were holding Miss Pierre's arms to try and get her hands behind her back, and also the officer that was holding Mr. Lee that was made the arrest there, the officers that were involved there. So that was a total of 7.
Chief Jennings, I want to ask
Yes.
you, with a situation like this where you have an officer that's gone through the internal investigations and it appears that they need to go through more training, how does that officer, in your eyes, do they have to gain the trust back of you as the chief, and how do that single officer gain the trust back from the community now that this video is out there, their faces back?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's actually something that I struggle with every day since this happened, because, you know, on one hand, you have members of the community that feel like we should fire every officer involved and that they should not be police officers anymore. On the other hand, you have opinions internally that say that this was absolutely justified and that we should just move on. There's nothing to see here. That's why from the beginning my comments have said that I have to be totally down the middle and objective about what we are dealing with. And my hope is that once the officers hear the explanation, we've had internal communication as well. We've had communication with Officer Pistone as well. But to understand that at a certain point when someone is under control and subdued, there is no need to deliver compliance strikes because there's nothing else to comply for. And so we're going to be accountable for that. And we determined that 14 of those strikes were while she was subdued and handcuffed and no longer a threat to the officers.
Will the officer return to patrol after the completed training and suspension?
That's not determined yet. The officer will remain in a current assignment that he's in now, and we will have that discussion later. This is still new, and to be honest with you, as the board was deliberating and talking, I had no idea what recommendation they would have, and then of course I have to concur with that recommendation. But also back to your question, how does he build the trust back in leadership? But I think that what we have to do is be very informative with him and explain the justification behind our ruling, and hopefully he will understand that. He has, I'm sure he is aware that this is a learning experience for him, and I'm sure that he wants to get better. Officer Pistone has an excellent record through internal affairs, and I'm sure that he will be able to be rehabilitated and be a fantastic officer.
Well, also in the video too, there's a moment to where afterwards, he as well as the other officer, that has not been named, were asked, do you have any injuries? And it appears that that officer, Officer Pistone, had smirked and then admitted, that he had hit, and then continued to chuckle a little bit. Now, that can be open to interpretations, but that's what it does here. So I want to ask, for people that are going to see this video, how should something like that be interpreted after a situation where blows are landed on individuals?
All I can say is that we're still human beings. We're not perfect, never claim to be perfect. The expectation for the public is us to be perfect. And this is probably not the last time we'll stand up and have these conversations about some actions that officers did that are controversial. But at the same time, we're not robots, and if there's an expectation that we will always say and do the right things, then I think that's something that'll never happen. So we're going to continue to get better after every incident, which we have proven over and over again, and we'll prove it again this time.
Are you, the woman and her lawyers pretty much have already said that they're going to sue. Do you think the city should defend any lawsuits against your officers in your department?
Yeah, that's not determined by me, but yeah, I'm biased on that, obviously, but I think we should defend everyone when we feel like that, there's always some litigation that's involved that will, that people will, that our attorneys will take over and take a look at that, but that's not for me to determine whether we should or should not. I can just weigh in on the process, and that's it.
I'm curious, so with all the videos that you guys released, I think I've watched every minute of every single one. Wow. One that stands out a lot is also the 2 hours the 2-hour video of her in the interview room.
Yes.
When you just watch that,
yeah,
and you just see everything that she's doing, even by herself in the interview room, appears to be unhinged. When you watch that, what do you see?
See a woman that's extremely distraught over what just happened, and that she's upset. And there's, obviously you saw there was not much cooperation that went long after that, but some would say that obviously not because of what just happened to her. So yeah, it is difficult to see that her response and reaction to everything that happened, but many people would say that they understand that, and I certainly understand it. But at the same time, I feel like our officers at that point were cordial and professional throughout the rest of that process.
Do you stand by the initiation of this call?
I do, yes. And like I've told you before, and I think what you're getting at is the fact that marijuana, is that worth getting out and making an arrest? What I can tell you is that, like I mentioned before, 194 violent crimes in that location within a mile radius in the last 3 years. Our officers are expected to be seen and visible and be out. And if, and I'll put another perspective to it, that if we are ignoring 2 people smoking marijuana getting ready to get on a city bus, and we drive by that, and this individual has a gun in his pack that he's carrying over his shoulder, and if that individual gets on that city bus and somehow gets into altercation and uses that weapon, then the story is going to be about how CMPD just ignored them smoking marijuana, and had we gotten out with them, they would have been able to locate the gun. So that's why I talk about Monday morning quarterback all the time, that there are different scenarios that can play out. But I will say this, that as long as marijuana is illegal, then I will expect my officers to address open marijuana use and marijuana sales. We just had an incident yesterday. An individual shot 5 times over a marijuana deal. So marijuana is not so innocent drug that we hear so much about. But if we don't want officers to address misdemeanor marijuana use, then make it legal.
Just to follow up, how does the officer determine whether it is marijuana or something marijuana adjacent that is legal that's being sold at the tobacco stores?
Yeah.
I know the attorney says that the substance they were smoking was purchased at one of those stores.
Yes.
So how does an officer approach that?
Well, let me tell you this, and I think we put this out, that the substance that they were in possession of was certainly illegal marijuana. It was at a level much higher than anything you'll get in buying hemp or anything with THC at a store that sells it legally. But what you have to be able to do as an officer is the assumption of that it is marijuana. And anything that, once you do the testing, if it's something that warrants an arrest for marijuana, then it's incumbent upon us to be able to prove that it is marijuana. Just no different than when we have deals of cocaine. And there's times when you make an arrest for cocaine, that when you do the testing, it comes back that it's not cocaine. And then you have to deal with the charges appropriately after that.
When you look at the videos and you see more and more officers arriving at the scene, but both of the suspects are already apprehended, certainly the quantity of officers is an aspect that escalated the scenario. when do officers determine when they've called for enough backup to not escalate the situation?
Yeah, a lot of times that's determined by the officers who are already on the scene, and you can sometimes on these videos you can hear that said you can cancel anyone else coming to the scene. We've got enough, or everything's under control. So some officers, when they hear another officer calling for help, they're going to drop what they're doing and they're going to go and try to help. And once they get there, they're going to be able to either determine whether we need any kind of crowd control or any assistance, any additional assistance on the arrest. But you know, what the expectation is that as soon as we get enough people there, that somebody is notifying the officers who aren't there yet, because the officers who are en route have no idea what they're getting ready to encounter until they get there.
What bothered you most? I know you put out a statement when the charges were dropped. What bothered you most? The assault on the officer being dropped, or the gun charge being dropped?
The assault on the officer would probably be the one thing that bothered me the most, because regardless of what led up to this, our officers were within justification of getting out with these individuals. The officer was in justification of making the arrest. To allow for somebody to punch an officer in the face and have no, absolutely zero repercussions in the legal system, except for the initial arrest, to me is an insult to our officers. And we can't live in a society where we allow people to assault officers. If we do that, then it's going to be a society that I don't think we want to be able to, we want to have to live in, because there has to be law and order in our community, and our police officers are tasked with providing that.
I want to ask about the compliance training. Where does that take place? And also, part of the compliance training, is it more geared toward the accusations that this officer faced at the time of excessive force of hitting this individual, but also does that include how to make it to where things don't escalate in a matter of less than a minute whenever you arrive on scene?
Yeah, certainly. So compliance training and the training that officers do, we are mandated to have what we call TAC training, defensive tactics training, every year, and it is also a mandate by the state. We also have our, we have our de-escalation facility, training facility at our training academy. So all of that is done at the training academy. I went through it the day this incident happened. That's when I completed my defensive tactics training. And during that time, we are trained, and thankfully for the facilities that we do have, that we are able to be put into real life situations that you can have choices, and then go back and review those choices that you made and see how you could have done better. And because it's every year, my hope is that every year we learn a little bit more and a little bit more, but we try to make it cumulative and to where we play off of not just incidents, current affair incidents that we are seeing, but also things that we have done in the past to continue that training on. So.
I was going to ask if that officer is going to be put through a very similar situation to what happened there.
That'll be determined by our training academy. So what they'll do is look at the entire incident and see where some of the gaps might be that they can help this officer to understand where some things that he could have done better. And then I can almost assure you that the TAC training next year will incorporate more of this, because we have to look at, and well, let me back up on that too, because when we have the policy, the group that we're looking at to review our policy, we have no idea what's going to come out of that at this point. So whatever comes out of that on the training, the changes in policy will also have to be incorporated in training as well. So we're going to be revamping a lot of that for next year.
And how long does training typically take?
The training usually is about for an 8-hour day. It involves firearms training, TAC training, taser training. So there's several parts of that training that you go, but it'll generally take an 8-hour day, and probably even additional if officers, because they're required to have night and daytime qualifications for firearms. So they might be able to split that up. So, yeah.
Is the Charlotte NAACP part of the, or the Mecklenburg County NAACP, are they part of the outside groups that are going to be helping you guys?
Yes, there's representation from NAACP.
Can you give us some of the other members or other representations that will be there from the outside?
We can actually share all of that, right? We can share every person that's on that. They've all been notified, and they're going to have their first meeting in January. Yeah, and I'm actually meeting with former Mayor Pro Tem Braxton Winston on Monday, in hopes that he will be facilitating a lot of these conversations, and we're going to have a discussion on what direction we want to see this take.
Chief, will those group discussions be public?
They will not, no. They will not.
Why is that?
Well, because I want these group discussions to be exactly open and free, right? I don't want people concerned with what's going to be publicized on comments that they might make and things that they may see. We're going to have some debate. We're going to have some open conversations, and probably some of those conversations will be tough conversations. And at the end of the day, we will certainly share what the outcome of that group is going to be, but certainly don't want that to be something that's public.
Chief, everybody now has the ability to look at this video. It was chaotic on the day, it appears chaotic in the video. Was that more chaotic in your eyes than a situation like this needed it to be?
I guess the short answer to that is yes, but we have to talk about culpability on both sides. We could go from anywhere to the point of it could have never happened if officers would have ignored the marijuana. Is that something you want us doing? I don't want my officers in a high crime area to just ignore obvious illegal activity. And then on the other hand, had the arrest taken place normally, like most arrests do, and there hadn't been interference with that arrest, then we wouldn't be sitting here talking either. Just keep in mind, we have, last year we had over 500,000 citizen contacts. We had 300, just a little over 300, I think it was 347 of those contacts that have resulted in some type of use of force. And when I say use of force, that could be something as simple as a scrape on the, because a handcuff scraped somebody's wrist, to using deadly force. So a very, very minute ideas of a very minute number of contacts result in any type of use of force whatsoever, and there's only 97% don't even result in arrest. So yeah, I wish that we can roll back to. I'm sure these officers, if they could roll back time, they would handle it differently. But that's life, and that's what we always say. We can always look back at things that we do every single day and say, I would have done this differently.
For these conversations will be happening in January, will there be Hispanic representation?
I'm not sure. We will give you that list of whoever's on that list. I can't think of all their names right now off the top of my head.
One more question. You said at the last press conference on this topic, are there things that I would like to change or do differently? Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are those things?
Me personally? Well, I mean, I wish that we could anticipate everything that's ever going to happen that will be controversial, or things that the gaps that we might see in our policy. And what I mean by that is, I'm not going to get ahead of the group that's going to be looking at our policy and making changes, but there are some things in here that I feel like we could have made more clear to our officers. For example, when is enough enough? When do you stop? Officer Pistone obviously thought that he's justified up until the point that we get her handcuffed, and the board and the internal affairs hearing showed that once she is subdued and no longer resisting, and we're working on getting the handcuffs on, that's when it should stop. So we could have been, there are some things that we can look at that in policy that we can make it more clear, and also in training.
Can he, I don't know how this works, can he appeal that, or is it final?
Certainly, yes, he can appeal that to civil service. It's still early. I don't know if he plans on doing that, but civil service appeal could absolutely be part of this. So. All right, thank you. All right.
All right, folks, a lot to unpack there. Thanks to Chief Jennings for being here. I just want to reiterate something that he said. In 2022, 529,000 police interactions and 357 what we call responses to resistance was what the chief said. So 529,000 compared to 357. Again, there was a lot to unpack there. We have a media release out to y'all that recaps some of the information shared here. Thanks for being here.
What year was that? Last year?
22, yep, 22.
It's 6:38 this morning, and we're asking where's the money this holiday season? Now, this one is about our teachers. Some school-age parents out